The cold December wind cut through the streets like a knife. Inside Riverside Mall, Christmas decorations sparkled under bright lights, and shoppers rushed around with bags full of gifts. But outside the glass doors, a different world existed. Robert Hayes stood at his usual post near the main entrance. At 52 years old, he'd been working as a security guard at this mall for 15 years. He knew every corner, every store, and most of the regular customers by face. His black uniform was always pressed, his shoes always polished. Robert took pride in his work, even though the pay wasn't much. It was nearly 7 in the evening. The temperature had dropped below freezing. Robert stamped his feet to keep warm as he watched people come and go. That's when he noticed the boy. The kid was small, probably around 10 years old. He stood just outside the entrance, pressed against the brick wall, trying to stay out of the wind. His clothes were torn and dirty. His feet were bare, red from the cold. He had no coat, just a thin t-shirt that had seen better days. Robert's heart sank. He'd seen homeless people before, but never a child this young, this alone. This late at night, the boy wasn't bothering anyone. He just stood there, shivering, watching people walk past him like he was invisible. Every few minutes, he'd rub his arms trying to create some warmth. His lips were turning blue. Robert glanced at the security cameras above him. He knew what mall policy said. No loitering, no homeless individuals on property. If someone looked like they didn't belong, you were supposed to ask them to leave. That was the rule. But this wasn't just someone. This was a child freezing in the winter cold. Robert made a decision. He pushed open the door and stepped outside. "Hey there," he said softly, kneeling down to the boy's level. "What's your name, son?" The boy looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. He didn't answer. "It's okay," Robert said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to make sure you're all right. You look really cold." The boy's teeth were chattering so hard he could barely speak. I'm okay," he whispered. "When's the last time you ate something?" The boy looked down at his bare feet. "Yesterday, I think." Robert felt anger rising in his chest. Not at the boy, but at a world that could let a child go hungry and freeze outside a building full of people buying things they didn't need. "Come with me," Robert said, standing up. "Let's get you warmed up." "I'm not allowed inside," the boy said. "The lady yesterday told me to leave." "Well, I'm telling you to come in," Robert replied. "And I work here, so it's okay," held out his hand. After a moment, the boy took it. His small hand was ice cold. Robert led him through the entrance. Immediately, the warm air from the heaters hit them. The boy closed his eyes and took a deep breath, like he was breathing in hope itself. Several shoppers stopped and stared. A woman in an expensive coat wrinkled her nose and pulled her own children closer. A man in a business suit looked Robert up and down with disapproval. Robert ignored them all. He guided the boy to a bench near the food court. "Wait here," he said. "I'll be right back." Robert went to his locker in the security office and grabbed his lunch bag. He'd packed 2 sandwiches that morning, like he always did. He also took his heavy jacket, the one his wife had given him last Christmas. When he returned, the boy was sitting exactly where he'd left him, looking around nervously like someone might yell at him any second. "Here," Robert said, handing him the lunch bag. "I've got turkey sandwiches, an apple, and some chips. You can have all of it." The boy stared at the food like it was treasure. "Really? Really? Go ahead, eat." The boy didn't need to be told twice. He tore into the sandwich, eating so fast Robert worried he might choke. "Slow down, buddy," Robert said with a small smile. "The food's not going anywhere." While the boy ate, Robert draped his jacket over the child's shoulders. It was way too big, hanging down past his knees, but it was warm. "Thank you," the boy whispered between bites. "You're welcome. Now, I need you to tell me the truth. Where are your parents?" The boy stopped chewing. His eyes filled with tears. "I don't know my real parents," he said quietly. "I was in a foster home, but the man there, he was mean. Really mean. So I ran away 3 days ago." Robert sat down beside him. "What's your name?" Tommy Chen." "Okay, Tommy, I'm Robert. And I want to help you, but I need to call someone who can make sure you're safe." Not the police to get you in trouble, but someone who helps kids like you. Is that okay? Tommy looked scared again. Will they send me back? Not to anyone who's mean to you, Robert promised. I have a friend who works with child services. She's good people. She'll make sure you go somewhere safe. I give you my word. Tommy nodded slowly, then went back to eating the apple. Robert pulled out his phone and called his friend Lisa, who'd been a social worker for 20 years. He explained the situation in quiet tones, while Tommy finished his food. I'll be there in 30 minutes, Lisa said. You did the right thing, Robert. After hanging up, Robert sat with Tommy, just talking. He learned that Tommy loved to draw, that he was good at math, that his favorite color was blue. The boy started to relax, even smile a little. But Robert noticed something else. The security camera above them had a perfect view of everything they were doing. The bench, the food, the jacket, all of it. He pushed the worry aside. Some things were more important than rules. 20 minutes later, Lisa arrived. She was a kind woman with a warm smile, and she treated Tommy with such gentleness that the boy agreed to go with her without protest. Thank you for calling me, Lisa said to Robert. He would have frozen to death out there tonight. Just doing what anyone should do, Robert replied. Before leaving, Tommy turned back to Robert. Mr. Robert? Yeah, buddy. You're a good person. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else just walked by. Those words hit Robert harder than anything else that night. He blinked back tears and nodded. You take care of yourself, Tommy, and remember, you matter. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Tommy smiled, a real genuine smile, then left with Lisa. Robert watched them go, feeling good about what he'd done. He'd helped a child in need. That was all that mattered. But as he walked back to his post, he noticed his supervisor standing near the security office, arms crossed, staring at him with an expression that sent a chill down his spine. Tomorrow, Robert thought, would be a very different kind of day. Robert didn't sleep well that night. He kept thinking about Tommy, hoping the boy was somewhere warm and safe, but he also kept seeing the look on his supervisor's face, that cold, angry stare. The next morning, Robert arrived at work 30 minutes early, like he always did. He made his usual rounds, checked all the doors, and settled into his routine. Maybe everything would be fine. Maybe his supervisor hadn't really seen anything important. At exactly 9 o'clock, the mall's intercom crackled to life. Robert Hayes. Please report to the manager's office immediately. His stomach dropped. In 15 years of working here, he'd only been called to the manager's office twice. Once when he got a commendation for stopping a shoplifter, and once when his daughter was born, and they threw him a small party. This felt different. Robert walked through the mall, passing the stores he knew so well. The bookshop where he'd bought his daughter's textbooks, the coffee place where he got his morning cup every day, the food court where he'd sat with Tommy just 12 hours ago when he'd reached the administrative offices on the 3rd floor. Supervisor, Dave Mitchell, was waiting outside. Go on in, Dave said, not meeting Robert's eyes. She's expecting you. The mall manager, Patricia Crawford, sat behind her large desk. She was a thin woman in her 40s, always dressed in expensive suits, always looking like she'd just smelled something unpleasant. On her desk sat a laptop, the screen facing toward an empty chair. Sit down, Mr. Hayes, she said. Her voice was ice cold. Robert sat. Patricia turned the laptop toward him and pressed play. The security footage from last night filled the screen. There was Robert, leading Tommy inside. There was Robert, giving him food. There was Robert, putting his jacket on the boy's shoulders. She let the entire thing play without saying a word. When it finished, she closed the laptop and folded her hands on her desk. Do you know what you've done? She asked. I helped a child who was freezing, Robert said calmly. A 10-year-old boy with no shoes in December. You violated mall policy, Patricia snapped. Section 12, paragraph 4, clearly states that homeless individuals are not permitted on the premises. You are supposed to ask them to leave, not bring them inside and feed them. He's a child, a liability, Patricia shot back. What if he'd stolen something? What if he'd gotten hurt on mall property? What if customers complained? Actually, they did complain. I've already received 3 emails from shoppers who were disturbed by seeing a homeless child in our establishment. Robert felt heat rising in his chest. Disturbed? They were disturbed by a hungry kid. They were disturbed by the image it projects, Patricia said, standing up. Riverside Mall is a premium shopping destination. We cater to a certain clientele. People come here to escape problems, not to be confronted with them. So we're supposed to just let children freeze outside our doors. We're supposed to call the proper authorities and let them handle it, not take matters into our own hands. She walked to the window, looking down at the mall below. You've been here 15 years, Robert? I've reviewed your file. Spotless record, never late, never any issues. Which makes this even more disappointing. I'm not disappointed in what I did, Robert said firmly. That boy needed help. Patricia turned to face him, and that's exactly why I can't keep you employed here. You put your personal feelings above company policy. You made a decision that could have exposed this mall to serious legal and financial consequences. And worst of all, you show no remorse. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. You're firing me? Robert asked, though he already knew the answer, effective immediately. You'll turn in your uniform, your badge, and your keys before you leave today. Dave will escort you to collect your personal belongings. Robert stood up slowly. His legs felt weak. Mrs. Crawford, I need this job. My wife is sick. She has treatments twice a week. The insurance from this job is the only way we can afford her medicine. Something flickered across Patricia's face. For just a second, she almost looked human. But then, it was gone. I'm sorry about your wife, she said, her voice slightly softer. But I have a business to run. I can't make exceptions, even for personal circumstances. Can't or won't. Excuse me? Robert took a breath. I've watched you make exceptions before. Last year, when your nephew got caught stealing from the electronics store, you covered it up. When the assistant manager was caught sleeping on duty 3 times, you gave him warnings. But I help one child, and I'm fired on the spot. Patricia's face hardened. How dare you? My nephew's situation was completely different, and you have no proof of any cover-up. As for your accusations, I could make things very difficult for you in this industry. Is that a threat? It's a reality, she said coldly. I have connections with security firms throughout this entire county. One phone call from me, and you'll find it very hard to get another position in this field. So I suggest you take your termination quietly and professionally. Robert felt like he'd been punched in the gut. She wasn't just firing him. She was threatening to destroy any chance he had of finding similar work. Dave knocked on the door and entered. Ready? He asked Robert. Robert looked at Patricia one more time. I don't regret what I did. That boy deserved kindness. I'm sorry you can't see that. Box up his things, Patricia told Dave, turning back to her computer. Make sure he's off the property within the hour. The walk back to the security office felt like a funeral march. Robert's coworkers stared as he passed. Word had already spread. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked away, afraid they might be next. In the locker room, Robert packed his few belongings into a cardboard box. A photo of his wife and daughter. His spare uniform. The coffee mug his daughter had given him that said "World's Best Dad." James Rodriguez, one of the younger guards, came in. Man, I'm so sorry, he whispered. What you did was right. We all know it. Then why didn't anyone speak up? Robert asked, not angry, just tired. James looked at the floor. I've got a family too. I can't risk my job, Robert nodded. He understood. That's how they kept people in line. Fear as he walked out of Riverside Mall for the last time. Carrying his box of belongings, Robert noticed something. There were people watching from the stores. His co-workers, people he'd worked beside for years. Some were crying, but none of them followed him. None of them stood with him. The automatic doors slid open, and Robert stepped outside into the cold. He looked back at the spot where Tommy had been standing last night. That's where it all started. That's where he'd made the choice that cost him everything. Would he make the same choice again? Robert thought about Tommy's smile when he said thank you. He thought about those blue lips warming up with hot food. He thought about knowing that at least one child would be safe tonight. Yeah, he'd make the same choice every single time. But as Robert walked to his car, the reality hit him hard. How was he going to tell his wife? How would they pay for her treatments? How would they keep the house? He sat in his car for a long time before starting the engine. Through the windshield, he could see Patricia Crawford standing in her office window. Watching him leave, Robert started the car and drove away, not knowing that this moment, this choice, would change everything. Not tomorrow, not next week, but 5 years down the road, in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Robert sat in his car outside his house for 20 minutes before going inside. The house was small, but it was theirs. Or at least it would be for another 15 years when the mortgage was finally paid off. Through the window, he could see his wife moving around in the kitchen. How was he going to tell her? Finally, he got out of the car and walked to the front door. His hand shook as he turned the key. "Door home early?" Angela called from the kitchen. She came around the corner, smiling, then stopped when she saw his face. What happened? Robert set down his box of belongings and told her everything. The boy, the food, the jacket, Patricia Crawford. The firing, all of it. When he finished, Angela was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked over and hugged him tight. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Robert felt tears he'd been holding back all morning finally break free. "I lost my job. Our insurance. How are we going to pay for your treatments?" "We'll figure it out," Angela said firmly. "We always do. But you saved a child's life, Robert. You did the right thing. That matters more than any job." Their daughter, Nicole, came home from school later that afternoon. She was 17, a senior in high school with dreams of going to college. When she heard what happened, she didn't cry. She just squared her shoulders. "I can get more hours at the grocery store," she said. "And maybe I can postpone college for a year, help out until you find something new." "No," Robert said immediately. "You're going to college. We'll make it work." But making it work turned out to be harder than any of them imagined. Robert applied to every security company in the area. At first, he'd get interviews. They'd look at his resume, see his 15 years of experience, and seem impressed. Then they'd make a phone call to check references, and everything would change. Their faces would go cold. The interview would end quickly. He'd never hear from them again. Patricia Crawford had made good on her threat. After 2 months of rejection, Robert's unemployment benefits were barely covering the basics. Angela's medical bills were piling up. They'd already skipped one of her treatments because they couldn't afford it. Robert took a job as a janitor at an office building downtown. The pay was half what he made at the mall, and there were no benefits. He worked nights, coming home at 6 in the morning, sleeping a few hours, then doing odd jobs during the day. Lawn work, furniture moving, anything that paid cash. Angela picked up sewing work from home, altering clothes for a local tailor despite the pain in her hands from her condition. Nicole worked 30 hours a week at the grocery store on top of her schoolwork, her college applications sitting untouched on her desk. By the end of the first year, they'd burned through their savings. The bank sent a foreclosure notice. They were 3 months behind on the mortgage. Robert sat at the kitchen table one night, staring at the stack of bills. Medical bills, mortgage statements, utility notices, all red, all urgent. "Might have to sell the house," he said quietly. Angela reached across the table and took his hand. "Then we'll sell it. We'll find an apartment. As long as we're together, we'll be okay." But they didn't sell. Robert's brother loaned them enough to catch up on 2 months of payments, giving them a little more time. Robert paid him back by working on his brother's rental properties every weekend. The second year was harder than the first. Angela's condition worsened. She needed more treatments, more medication. The medical bills became an avalanche they couldn't outrun. Robert took a second job delivering packages during the day. He'd work from 6 at night until 6 in the morning as a janitor, sleep 2 hours, then drive packages until 6 in the evening. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. He lost weight. His hair started going gray. The smile lines around his eyes turned into worry lines. Nicole gave up on college entirely. She became a full-time cashier and took night classes at the community college. Studying in the tiny breaks between work and school, she never complained, but Robert saw the sadness in her eyes when her friends posted pictures of university campuses and dorm rooms. One night, Albert broke down. He was so tired he could barely see straight, standing in the kitchen at 2 a.m. making coffee for another shift. "I ruined everything," he said to Angela. "If I just followed the rules, we'd be fine. You'd have your treatments. Nicole would be in college. We wouldn't be drowning." Angela, weak from her illness but strong in spirit, stood up from the kitchen chair. She walked over and grabbed his face in her hands. "Listen to me," she said. "You saved a child's life. A little boy who had nobody. You gave him hope when the whole world had given up on him. That matters, Robert. That matters more than any of this. Look at what it cost us. It cost us money and comfort. That's all. We still have each other. We still have our family. We still have our souls." She touched his chest. "You're still the man I married. The good man. The kind man. Don't you dare regret that." Year 3 brought a small miracle. Angela qualified for a state medical program that covered most of her treatments. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The crushing weight of medical bills finally eased. Just a little. Robert found a slightly better job working security at a warehouse. The pay was still less than what he'd made at the mall, but it was steady, and it had basic insurance. He kept his janitorial job too. They needed every dollar. Nicole finished her 2-year degree at community college. She got a job as a dental assistant, making more money than her grocery store position. She still lived at home, contributing everything she could to the family expenses. They were surviving. Barely, but surviving. Year 4 looked a lot like Year 3. Work, bills, worry, repeat. Robert's body was wearing down from the constant labor and lack of sleep. His knees hurt. His back ached. He was 57 now, but he felt 70. Sometimes late at night, Brett would think about Tommy. He wondered what happened to that little boy. Was he okay? Did he end up in a good home? Did he even remember the security guard who gave him a sandwich and a jacket? Robert never regretted helping him, but he'd be lying if he said it didn't hurt. The cost had been so high. By Year 5, things had stabilized into a new normal. It wasn't the life they'd planned, but it was their life. They'd kept the house through sheer determination and sacrifice. Angela's health had leveled off. Nicole was building a career. Robert still worked 2 jobs, still struggled to pay bills, still felt the weight of that one decision from 5 years ago. But he'd made peace with it. One Tuesday afternoon in late spring, Robert was doing yard work. It was his day off from both jobs, and he was trying to fix the lawnmower that had broken down again. He was covered in grease, frustrated, tired. When he heard a car pull up, he looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. A sleek black Mercedes sat at the curb, the kind of car Robert had only seen in magazines. The door opened, and a young man stepped out, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Robert made in 3 months. Behind him, an older couple emerged from the back seat. The young man walked up the driveway, and there was something familiar about his face. "Something in his eyes, Mr. Hayes?" the young man asked. Robert stood up slowly, confused. "Yes." The young man smiled, and suddenly Robert saw it. Saw him. That same smile from 5 years ago. "My name is Tommy Chen," the young man said, "and I've been looking for you for a very long time." Robert's wrench slipped from his hand and clattered onto the driveway. He stared at the young man in front of him, unable to speak. Tommy. The little boy with no shoes. The child he'd given his lunch to, but this wasn't a little boy anymore. This was a 15-year-old who carried himself like someone much older. Confident, successful, completely transformed Tommy. Robert finally managed to say, "Is it really you?" "It's really me," Tommy said, his eyes getting watery. "I never forgot you, Mr. Hayes. Not for a single day." The older couple stepped forward. The man was Asian, maybe in his 50s, wearing glasses and a kind smile. The woman beside him had warm eyes and held a folder in her hands. "I'm David Chen," the man said, extending his hand. "And this is my wife, Helen. We adopted Tommy 5 years ago." Robert shook their hands, still trying to process what was happening. I don't understand. "How did you find me?" "It took a while," Tommy said. "But I never stopped looking. Can we talk, please?" Angela appeared at the front door. "Robert, is everything okay?" "Honey, you should come out here," Robert called back. Angela came down the steps, moving slowly, leaning on her cane. Nicole pulled into the driveway right behind the Mercedes, home from work. She got out of her old sedan, looking confused at the expensive car blocking the street. "Let's all go inside," Robert said. "I'll make some coffee." 10 minutes later, they were all seated in the Hayes' small living room. The furniture was old, but clean. Family photos covered the walls. It was a humble home, but it was filled with love. Tommy sat forward on the couch, his hands clasped together. "I need to tell you what happened after that night," he began. "After your friend Lisa took me to child services." Robert leaned back in his chair, listening. "They found me a temporary placement first," Tommy continued. "Then, after a few weeks, I met David and Helen. They were foster parents looking to adopt. They took me in, and for the first time in my life, I felt safe." Helen smiled, reaching over to pat Tommy's hand. "But it was more than that," Tommy said. "They saw something in me. I'd always been good with numbers, with computers, but nobody ever cared. David and Helen cared. They got me a tutor. They bought me a laptop. They encouraged me." David spoke up. "Tommy is brilliant. We just gave him the opportunity to show it." "I started coding," Tommy said, "building apps, learning programming languages. By the time I was 12, I'd created a simple game. By 13, I'd built something bigger. An app that helps connect foster kids with resources, with tutors, with opportunities." Robert's eyes widened. "You created that? With David and Helen's help?" "Yes. But here's the thing, Mr. Hayes. The app got attention. A tech company saw it and wanted to buy it. They offered us $2.7 million. The room went silent. "We sold it when I turned 14, Tommy said quietly. "I'm 15 now, and I've used that money to start a foundation. But before I did anything else, I had to find you. Because none of this would have happened if you hadn't seen me that night." "Tommy, I just gave you a sandwich," Robert said, his voice shaking. Tommy said firmly, "You gave me hope. You treated me like I mattered when everyone else walked past me like I was invisible. Do you know how many people saw me that night? Hundreds. And every single one of them looked away. Except you." Tears were streaming down Angela's face. Nicole sat frozen, her hand over her mouth. "You lost your job because of me," Tommy said. "I found out about that. It took me 3 years, but I tracked down what happened. I hired investigators to look into everything." "You hired investigators?" Robert asked. "I needed to know the whole story," Tommy explained. "And what I found made me angry, really angry." Helen opened the folder she'd been carrying and pulled out documents. "We discovered that Patricia Crawford had a pattern. Over the years, she'd fired 17 employees for minor infractions or for personal reasons. Many of them were people of color. She'd also been misusing mall funds and covering up incidents involving her family members." David nodded. "We took all of this evidence to the corporate headquarters of Riverside Mall. They conducted their own investigation. Patricia Crawford was fired 6 months ago," Helen said. "There's also a lawsuit. She's being held accountable for years of discrimination and misconduct." Robert sat back, stunned. "I had no idea. You weren't supposed to," Tommy said. "She buried everything. But the truth came out. And there's more." Tommy reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Robert with both hands, a gesture of respect. "What's this?" Robert asked. "Open it." Robert's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside was a letter on official letterhead. As he read it, his eyes grew wider and wider. "This is a job offer," he whispered. "I started my own company," Tommy explained. a tech firm that creates apps and programs for social good. We're small right now, just 20 employees, but we're growing fast. I want you to be our director of security and operations." "Tommy, I'm not qualified for something like that." "You're more qualified than you know," Tommy insisted. "You make good decisions. You care about people. You have integrity. Those are the qualifications I need. The rest you can learn." Robert looked at the salary number. His heart nearly stopped. It was more than double what he'd made at the mall. Triple his current combined income from both jobs. "There's full benefits," David added. "Health insurance that covers everything, including pre-existing conditions. Dental, vision, retirement plan." Angela gasped. "Robert, that would cover my treatments. All of them." "There's one more thing," Tommy said. He pulled out another envelope. "This is for Nicole." Nicole's hands shook as she took it. "What is it?" "A full scholarship to any university you want to attend," Tommy said. "Books, tuition, housing, everything. You sacrificed your dreams to help your family. Now let me help you get them back." Nicole burst into tears. Angela pulled her daughter into her arms, both of them crying. Robert couldn't speak. He just sat there, staring at these papers, these gifts, this impossible turn of events. "Why?" he finally asked. "Tommy, you don't owe me this." "Yes, I do," Tommy said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You saw me, Mr. Hayes. When I was nobody, when I was just a dirty kid on the street. You saw me. You fed me. You kept me warm. You called someone who could help me. You sacrificed everything for a stranger." He stood up and walked over to Robert, kneeling down beside his chair. "I spent 5 years in the best home I could imagine," Tommy said. "I got an education. I built a business. I have opportunities most people only dream about. And every single step of that journey started with you, with your kindness, with your choice to do the right thing, even when it cost you everything." Robert reached out and put his hand on Tommy's shoulder. "I never regretted it. Not once." "I know," Tommy said, smiling through his tears. "That's exactly why you deserve this." Ellen spoke up. "You planted a seed that night, Mr. Hayes. You just never got to see it grow. Well, now it's grown into something beautiful. And it's time for the harvest to come back to you." Robert looked around his living room, at his wife, crying tears of joy, at his daughter, holding a scholarship that would change her life, at this young man who'd survived and thrived against all odds. 5 years of struggle, 5 years of sacrifice, 5 years of wondering if he'd made the right choice. And now, finally, he had his answer. "When do I start?" Robert asked, his voice steady, despite the tears running down his face. Tommy grinned. "How about next Monday?" That Sunday evening, the night before Robert's first day at his new job, the Hayes family sat together at their kitchen table. It was the same table where they'd counted bills and worried about foreclosure. The same table where they'd made hard decisions and harder sacrifices. But tonight was different. Angela had cooked a proper dinner for the first time in months. Nothing fancy, just meatloaf and mashed potatoes, but it felt like a feast. Nicole had set the table with their good dishes, the ones they'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come. "I can't believe this is real," Nicole said, looking at the acceptance letter from the university. She'd been accepted to 3 schools and had chosen one with a great pre-med program. Her dream of becoming a doctor was finally within reach. "It's real," Robert said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "You're going to be amazing." Angela raised her glass of water. 2 second chances," she said. They clinked their glasses together, smiling, soaking in a moment of peace they'd earned through 5 years of struggle. Later that night, Robert couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. Tomorrow, he'd start a job that paid more than he'd ever imagined. He'd have an office, a title, respect. "You okay?" Angela whispered beside him. "Just thinking," Robert said, "about how close we came to losing everything, about how one choice changed our entire lives." "You made the right choice," Angela said. "You always did." Monday morning arrived bright and clear. Robert put on the new suit that Tommy had insisted on buying for him. He barely recognized himself in the mirror. He looked like a different person. But when he looked in his eyes, he saw the same man. The man who'd helped a freezing child. The man who'd sacrificed everything for what was right. Tommy's company, Hope Tech Solutions, was located in a modern building downtown. When Robert walked through the glass doors, Tommy was there waiting for him. "Welcome to your first day," Tommy said, shaking his hand. "Let me show you around." The office was small but impressive. Clean, bright, full of young people working on computers. There was an energy in the air, a sense of purpose. "Everyone here believes in what we're doing," Tommy explained as they walked. "We're not just building apps to make money. We're building tools that help people. Foster care systems, educational resources, community support networks. Every single program we create has a mission." He led Robert to a corner office with windows overlooking the city. On the door was a nameplate, "Robert Hayes, Director of Security and Operations." "This is yours," Tommy said. Robert stepped inside. There was a desk, a computer, bookshelves, and on the wall, a framed photograph. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was a security camera screenshot from that night 5 years ago. Robert, kneeling down beside a small boy outside the mall. "I wanted you to remember," Tommy said softly. "This is where it all started." One moment of kindness that changed everything. Robert's eyes filled with tears. "I'll never forget." The first few weeks were challenging. Robert had to learn new systems, new technologies, new responsibilities. But Tommy was patient, and the team was welcoming. They all knew Robert's story. They all knew why he was there. Robert discovered he was good at his job. His years of security experience translated well. He understood people, understood how to keep things safe, understood how to build systems that worked. But more than that, he brought something else to the company, heart. One afternoon, about a month into his new position, Robert noticed a young intern struggling. The kid was maybe 19, working part-time while going to school. He looked exhausted. Robert called him into his office. "You okay?" He asked the intern, whose name was Carlos, hesitated. Then it all came out. He was working 3 jobs, barely making rent, falling behind in classes. He was about to drop out. Robert listened, then made a phone call. By the end of the day, Tommy had created a new paid internship program with better hours and better pay. Carlos was the first recipient. "You see needs that others miss," Tommy told Robert later. "That's your gift." As months passed, Robert watched his family bloom. Angela's health improved with consistent treatment. The stress that had been slowly killing her began to fade. She started painting again, something she'd given up years ago. Nicole thrived at university. She called home every Sunday, excited about her classes, her new friends, her future. She'd found a study group of other pre-med students, and for the first time in 5 years, she sounded young and carefree. Robert paid back his brother in full. He caught up on every bill. He got the house repairs done that he'd been putting off for years. He even bought Angela a new car when her old one finally died. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was deeper than that. 6 months into his new job, Tommy called a company meeting. Everyone gathered in the main conference room. Tommy stood at the front, looking nervous. "I have an announcement," he said. "We're expanding. We've secured funding to triple our staff and launch 5 new programs." Everyone cheered. "But there's something else," Tommy continued. "We're starting the Hayes Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping people who help others. People like Robert, who sacrifice their own security to do what's right." Felt his face flush as everyone turned to look at him. "Foundation will provide emergency financial support to workers who lose their jobs for ethical reasons," Tommy explained. "It'll help cover medical bills, mortgage payments, whatever people need to survive while they get back on their feet. Because nobody should have to choose between doing the right thing and feeding their family." The room erupted in applause. Robert stood up, overwhelmed, and Tommy came over to hug him. "This is your legacy," Tommy whispered. "Not just what you did for me, but what you're going to do for thousands of others." That evening, Robert drove home through the city. He passed Riverside Mall. The parking lot was half empty. He'd heard the mall was struggling, losing stores, losing customers. Patricia Crawford's management had done lasting damage. He didn't feel happy about that. He just felt sad. Sad that she'd never understood what really mattered. When he pulled into his driveway, he saw Angela working in the garden. She was planting flowers, something she'd always wanted to do but never had the energy for. She looked up and waved. Dirt on her hands, a smile on her face. Robert sat in his car for a moment, watching her. 5 years ago, he'd stood in this same driveway, broken and afraid, wondering how they'd survive. Now look at them. He thought about Tommy, about that scared little boy who'd become an extraordinary young man. He thought about all the people the Hayes Foundation would help. He thought about Carlos and all the other interns who'd get opportunities they deserved. One act of kindness. One simple choice. One sandwich and a jacket on a cold December night. That's all it took to start a ripple that became a wave. Robert got out of his car and walked over to his wife. He kissed her forehead and knelt down beside her in the garden. "What are you planting?" he asked. "Hope," Angela said with a smile. "I'm planting hope." Robert looked at the small seeds in the soil. In a few months, they'd grow into something beautiful, something that would bloom year after year. Just like kindness, just like the choice he'd made 5 years ago. To see a child when everyone else looked away, he picked up a trowel and started helping his wife dig. Together, they planted seeds in the earth, preparing for a future that was finally beautifully bright. And somewhere across town, Tommy sat in his apartment, looking at a photograph on his desk. It was the same security camera image that hung in Robert's office. A man kneeling beside a boy, offering help when help was needed most. Tommy touched the frame gently. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." The next morning, Robert went to work with a new purpose. He wasn't just director of security anymore. He was part of something bigger, a movement of kindness. A circle of giving that would keep expanding, touching more lives, creating more hope. Because that's what happens when you choose compassion over rules, when you choose humanity over policy. When you choose to see people instead of problems, you change the world. One person at a time, one moment at a time, one act of kindness at a time. And it all starts with a simple choice. To care when caring costs you everything. Robert Hayes had made that choice 5 years ago, and he'd make it again. Every single day for the rest of his life.